Pittsburgh, 1876. A mother screams as her husband convulses at the dinner table, foam at his lips. The culprit isn't arsenic or spoiled meat, it's something far more common. For 40 years, tomato ketchup has been killing Americans. Not the tomatoes themselves, but what they touched. Pewter plates, the standard in every American home, leach deadly lead into acidic sauces. Doctors call it tomato madness, violent seizures, hallucinations, death. Newspapers run headlines, the killer condiment, mothers dump bottles down drains, an entire industry faces extinction. But one man sees opportunity in the panic. Henry John Heinz believes he can resurrect America's most feared food and build an empire from poison. This is the story of how a German immigrant with clear glass bottles and an army of chemists turned America's deadliest condiment into its most trusted brand. The Ketchup Wars of 1876, where food science met marketing genius and transparency became the ultimate weapon. Before 1906, there were no food safety laws in America. None. Companies could put anything in your food and call it whatever they wanted. Cocaine in your soda, morphine in your cough syrup, sawdust in your sausage, and nobody had to tell you. Henry Heinz didn't just sell ketchup. He accidentally invented consumer protection. When he put his ketchup in clear glass bottles in 1876, he was saying something revolutionary. Look inside, I have nothing to hide. His competitors were furious. See-through bottles exposed their brownish, separated, suspicious-looking products. Heinz had weaponized transparency. This is the moment that changed everything. When a condiment salesman realized that proving you're not poisoning people is actually a competitive advantage. But Heinz went further. He hired chemists, not to make his ketchup taste better, to prove it was safe. He published their findings. He invited inspectors into his factory. He put ingredient lists on his labels when nobody else did. Remember, doctors had spent 40 years telling people that tomato ketchup could cause madness and death. They weren't completely wrong, just wrong about the tomatoes. The real killer was lead poisoning from pewter plates reacting with acidic sauces. Heinz's chemists proved this. They solved a 40-year medical mystery while selling condiments. By 1900, Heinz was displaying his products at the White House. He'd turned ketchup from a suspected poison into a symbol of American progress. His purity campaign gave Teddy Roosevelt the blueprint for the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, the law that created the FDA. Every nutrition label you read, every ingredient list, every food safety inspection, it all traces back to a ketchup salesman who realized trust is more valuable than secrecy. Meanwhile, Jonas Yerkes was still selling walnut ketchup in opaque containers, insisting customers should just trust him. By 1910, his company was gone. Heinz didn't just win the ketchup wars. He invented the rules of the game and then got the government to enforce them on everyone else. 1830s America. Tomato ketchup was everywhere, on every table, in every kitchen. Then people started dying. Doctors called it tomato madness, violent seizures, paralysis, death. The culprit? Not the tomatoes, the plates. Tomatoes are highly acidic. When served on pewter plates containing lead, the acid leached poison directly into the sauce. Every meal was a game of Russian roulette. By 1840, the medical establishment declared war on tomatoes. Publications warned they caused brain fever, madness, even violent criminal behavior. Thousands died. The tomato, once called the love apple, became America's most feared food. Entire crops were burned. Restaurants removed it from menus. But here's the twist. Nobody knew it was the lead. They blamed the fruit itself. For 40 years, America's ketchup industry operated in the shadows of death. Enter the Ketchup Wars. By 1876, dozens of companies were selling tomato ketchup in secret, praying customers wouldn't drop dead. The biggest player? Jonas Yerkes. Yerkes had dominated the condiment game for decades with walnut ketchup, a safe non-tomato alternative that tasted like regret. But tomato ketchup was more profitable if you survived making it. Then a 32-year-old entrepreneur named Henry Heinz had a revelation. What if the tomatoes weren't the problem? What if it was everything else? Heinz did something no food manufacturer had ever done. He hired actual chemists, not to hide the poison, to prove there wasn't any. His team discovered the truth America had missed for 40 years. Store the ketchup in glass, not pewter. No lead contact, no death, just tomatoes. But proving it scientifically was one thing. Convincing a terrified nation to eat tomato ketchup again? That would require the first food safety campaign in American history. Before tomatoes took over, American dinner tables were drenched in something far stranger: walnut ketchup, a dark, fermented sauce that looked like motor oil and tasted like pickled tree bark. The word ketchup itself came from ketchup, a fermented fish sauce brought from Southeast Asia by British traders in the 1600s. No tomatoes, just brine, anchovies, and thyme. By 1800, American cookbooks listed dozens of ketchup varieties: mushroom, oyster, grape, lemon, even anchovy. Tomatoes, barely mentioned. They were still called poison apples. Mushroom ketchup reigned supreme in British colonies. Cooks would harvest pounds of wild mushrooms, salt them for days, then boil the black liquid into a savory concentrate. But here's what nobody understood yet. It wasn't the tomatoes that were killing people. It was the plates they ate them off of. Pewter, an alloy of tin and lead, was everywhere in 19th century America. Cheap, durable, perfect for plates and spoons, and absolutely deadly when it met acidic foods. When tomato ketchup hit pewter, the acid leached lead directly into the sauce. Families would season their meals, then slowly poison themselves bite by bite. The symptoms were horrifying: violent mood swings, hallucinations, organ failure. Doctors called it tomato madness. Newspapers warned parents to keep children away from tomato-based foods. By 1850, tomato ketchup was America's most feared condiment. Meanwhile, walnut and mushroom ketchup, less acidic, less deadly, remained perfectly respectable. Then a young entrepreneur named Jonas Yerkes did something revolutionary. He bottled ketchup commercially. Not tomato, he wasn't insane. Walnut ketchup. Safe, familiar, profitable. Yerkes became America's first ketchup baron, selling a product that wouldn't kill his customers. But across Pennsylvania, a grocery clerk's son was about to change everything. 1875. Henry Heinz stands in a Pittsburgh courtroom declaring bankruptcy. His horseradish company has collapsed. He's lost everything. But in his coat pocket, he carries something that will change American food forever: a clear glass bottle. For decades, condiments came in opaque ceramic crocks and brown bottles. Customers never saw what they were buying: sawdust filler, turnip paste, coal tar dyes, all hidden in darkness. Heinz had watched his father nearly die from tainted food. He'd seen the lead poisoning victims, their minds destroyed by acidic tomato sauces eating through pewter plates. He knew the enemy wasn't tomatoes, it was secrecy. So he made a radical decision: show them everything. If his ketchup was pure, why hide it? While Jonas Yerkes still peddled murky walnut ketchup in dark bottles, Heinz would bottle sunshine. But first he needed proof. Heinz hired university chemists, unprecedented for a condiment maker. They tested every batch. No benzoate preservatives, no coal tar red, just tomatoes, vinegar, and spices. Pure food, proven by science. This was the revolution: transparency as marketing. In an era when tomato poison still haunted American minds, Heinz would wage war with truth itself. Glass bottles, public lab results, a purity campaign against an invisible enemy. His timing was perfect. The Great Ketchup Panic was reaching its peak. Doctors still warned against tomato products. Newspapers ran weekly poisoning stories, and Jonas Yerkes controlled 60% of the market with his walnut recipe. Heinz needed a weapon that would cut through decades of fear. He found it in the most unlikely place: the Pennsylvania State Fair, armed with nothing but pickles and pins. 1876, Henry Heinz faced an impossible problem. Americans believed tomato ketchup could kill you, and they were absolutely right. For 40 years, doctors documented victims, seizures, madness, death. The culprit wasn't the tomatoes, it was the pewter plates leaching lead into acidic sauces. Heinz's competitors didn't care. Jonas Yerkes was still bottling walnut ketchup in lead-glazed containers. F&J Heinz needed to prove tomato ketchup could be safe. So Heinz did something no food manufacturer had ever done. He hired actual chemists. These weren't marketing men. They were trained scientists who could prove with data that glass bottles eliminated lead contamination entirely. While competitors hid their poison in opaque ceramic crocks, Heinz made a radical choice: clear glass bottles. If his ketchup was pure, let America see it. This wasn't just about safety, it was warfare. Heinz was weaponizing transparency against an entire industry built on secrecy and death. His chemists published their findings: lead levels 0, preservatives none needed when you controlled purity from soil to bottle. But data wasn't enough. Americans needed to see the difference with their own eyes. Heinz needed spectacle. He commissioned the construction of traveling exhibition booths, mobile laboratories where fairgoers could watch chemists test competitors' products versus his own. Live demonstrations showed lid particles precipitating from rival ketchups. Heinz's bottles, crystal clear, no lead, no poison, just tomatoes. Newspapers picked up the story. Heinz proves ketchup need not kill. It was America's first food safety campaign, and it was destroying the competition. Jonas Yerkes scrambled to respond, claiming his walnut ketchup had never caused problems. But Heinz's chemists tested it anyway, dangerously high lead levels. Within months, Heinz's Pure Food Crusade became his brand identity. Those little pickle pins at state fairs, they weren't just souvenirs. They were proof you'd witnessed the revolution. Heinz had turned science into marketing and transparency into a weapon. The Ketchup Wars weren't just about taste anymore. They were about survival, and only the pure would win. September 1893. Henry Heinz arrives at the Chicago World's Fair with 10,000 pickle-shaped pins and a plan to turn Americans into walking advertisements. His booth is in the wrong location, 3rd floor, barely any foot traffic. Desperate, he hires boys to hand out coupons. Free gift at Heinz booth, 3rd floor. Within hours, the staircase collapses from the stampede. The pickle pin becomes the fair's most coveted souvenir. Women wear them on lapels, men on watch chains. Heinz gives away all 10,000 in 9 days. But the pins aren't just clever marketing, they're psychological warfare against Jonas Yerkes. Every person wearing one is a walking testament. I trust Heinz enough to advertise for them. While Yerkes still sells ketchup in opaque ceramic bottles, hiding the brown, separated sludge inside, Heinz unveils his masterstroke, the clear glass bottle. Transparency as weapon. Customers can see exactly what they're buying. No sediment, no separation, no mystery ingredients, just pure tomato red. This wasn't just about ketchup. Heinz was waging America's first food purity campaign in an era when most packaged food was adulterated garbage. Coal tar dyes, formaldehyde preservatives, sawdust fillers. In the 1890s, eating processed food was Russian roulette. Heinz promised something radical: honesty. He printed his ingredients on every label, unheard of at the time. He invited customers to tour his factories: glass bottles, glass walls, glass business practices. The pickle pins kept spreading. By 1900, Heinz had distributed over 1 million. They appeared in photograph albums, jewelry boxes, even wedding bouquets. Jonas Yerkes watched his empire crumble. His walnut ketchup, once the standard, now seemed archaic. His opaque bottles looked like they were hiding something. Because they were. Heinz had weaponized trust in an era of poison, and he'd done it with a pickle pin and a see-through bottle. But Yerkes wouldn't go down without a fight, and what he did next would spark the dirtiest battle in condiment history. 1876. Henry Heinz's crystal-clear bottles gleam on store shelves across Pennsylvania. His sales have tripled in 2 years. Meanwhile, Jonas Yerkes, the man who once dominated the condiment market, sits in his Philadelphia warehouse, surrounded by barrels of walnut ketchup that nobody wants anymore. Yerkes made a fortune in the 1850s selling walnut and mushroom ketchup. He'd been in the business for nearly 3 decades. When tomatoes got their deadly reputation, he capitalized on it. Why would he change now? But Heinz understood something Yerkes didn't. The public was desperate for tomato ketchup. They just needed proof it wouldn't kill them. Yerkes saw tomatoes as the enemy. Heinz saw them as the future. Yerkes' first mistake: he refused to use glass. Too expensive, he told his partners. Customers don't care what the bottle looks like. He kept using ceramic containers, the same ones that reminded people of the pewter plates that had poisoned their grandparents. His second mistake: no chemists. While Heinz hired scientists from Philadelphia's finest universities, Yerkes relied on his 30-year-old recipes. If walnut ketchup was good enough for my father, he reportedly said, it's good enough for America. Here's what's crazy. Yerkes actually had the money to compete. His company was worth more than Heinz's. but he was fighting yesterday's war while Heinz was winning tomorrow's market. By 1877, the gap became a chasm. Heinz's pickle pins were on 10,000 lapels. His glass bottles sat in 500 stores. Yerkes walnut ketchup was being clearanced at half price. Yerkes salesman begged him to create a tomato recipe. He finally relented, but made a fatal error. He put it in the same opaque bottles with no transparency campaign, no chemist's endorsements, no story. Customers looked at Yerkes tomato ketchup and asked the obvious question, if it's safe, why are you hiding it? Without transparency, literally and figuratively, trust never materialized. The bottles sat unsold. By 1880, Jonas Yerkes was out of the ketchup business entirely. He pivoted to importing spices, a dignified retreat for a man who couldn't see that the world had changed. His warehouses were liquidated for pennies on the dollar. Heinz, meanwhile, was building a factory that would produce 12 million bottles annually by decade's end. The ketchup wars were over, and the winner wasn't just the better product, it was the better story, told through glass. Yerkes' downfall teaches us something timeless. In a crisis of trust, transparency isn't optional, it's everything. And the man who refuses to show his work will always lose to the man who does, even if his product is just as good. 1876. Henry Heinz stood at the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition, handing out pickle pins and clear glass bottles of tomato ketchup. His competitors thought he was insane. For 40 years, America had feared tomato ketchup as a silent killer. The diagnosis was real. The villain was lead poisoning from pewter plates. But the public blamed the tomatoes. Heinz didn't just sell ketchup. He hired chemists, published their results, and turned transparency into his weapon. Clear bottles meant nothing to hide. While Jonas Yerkes clung to walnut ketchup in opaque containers, Heinz launched America's first food purity campaign. He wasn't selling condiments, he was selling trust. The ketchup wars weren't just about market share. They revealed that Americans were dying from their own dinnerware, not their food. One man's marketing campaign exposed a national health crisis. By 1906, Heinz's transparency crusade had helped inspire the Pure Food and Drug Act. The man who sold ketchup in glass bottles had accidentally revolutionized American food safety. Today, we take ingredient labels and food regulations for granted. But it started with a ketchup salesman who realized that showing people what they were eating was more powerful than any advertisement. The tomato was never the poison, the plates were. But it took a marketing genius with chemists and clear glass to prove it and change how America ate forever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos.